Still no truth and justice for the Hani family. Leaders of the Tripartite Alliance earlier on paying their homage to the late struggle stalwart and uMkhonto with Sizwe commander Chris Hani. Cosatu says if Hani was alive, he would expect leaders to cleanse their NC, South African Communist Party and the Trade Union Federation, raising issues of corruption and factionalism and arrogance. For more on this, we are now joined by Cosatu President Zingiswa Losi. Good to have you, Zingiswa, and thank you very much for your time. Is it fitting for the alliance, as opposed to use this moment of reflection to reflect on the issues that are plaguing the alliance itself?
Thank you very much, and good evening to you, Thabo, and the viewers. I think today was a moment of reflection as we remembered this fateful day in 1993 when the life of our liberator was taken away from us. But it is a moment where we should honestly reflect, not to make it a yearly activity where it is common that we are going to prepare notes and go and say things that we think people want to hear. But when we stand on top of the grave of those that departed fighting for our freedom, believing that their spirit lives on with us, it is important for us to then speak truth to power and be able to mean the things that we say, but also importantly act according to what we have said. So today was a day of reflection, and we're hopeful as a federation that it is not a platform that we take for granted as alliance, but it is a platform that when we say the words that we use, we understand that the people of this country are listening, but importantly, Chris Hani himself is watching over us and wondering if what we are saying is indeed a reflection of the struggle that he pursued.
What are the similar point of reflection? Because what most of the speakers were doing today was to lift up the question that, for example, 30 years on, there's still no truth and justice around the Chris Hani murder, and the Hani family still have not gotten to the truth. But similar to that, 29 years on, we are still discussing issues of the transfer of the economy. What do the fact that these two things are happening in tandem tell us about, one, the mass democratic revolution, how it has progressed, what it has achieved, what it hasn't achieved, and what challenges it faces?
I think, as we have said as a federation today, that we are 29 years into our liberation, 30 years of Comrade Chris's passing. And when we make a reflection of how far we have come, but also where are the shortcomings, correctly as it was stated that the issue of land is very central to the true liberation of the people of this country, particularly the African people, black in particular. And until we're able to understand why a decision was made for us, through the spilling of the blood of Comrade Chris, to go and cast the vote for the first time in a democratic, to usher in democracy in our country. If the land is not back to our people, as the SACP was very clear on what does that mean, then we would not have paid tribute to the struggle that Comrade Chris pursued. If the economy still remains in the hands of the few, we would not have concluded, or at least pursued the revolution that Comrade Chris pursued until his time of passing. If there's still inequality, high levels of poverty, and high levels of unemployment in South Africa, we must realize that we have not attained what Comrade Chris and others fought for, what we can term as a true liberation of the African child in this country. When we have so many kids that are languishing in poverty and others cannot go and further their studies, and those that have cannot find employment in this country, would have betrayed the legacy of Comrade Chris. So this is the time that when we make the 29 years of the liberation and the 30 years that would have led us to this liberation through the spilling of the blood of Comrade Chris on the 10th of April 1993, when we realize how we have traveled and what are the shortcomings, we should be able to say we have not realized socialism as defined by Comrade Chris. Because Comrade Chris defined it so eloquently and very simple that he said socialism is about decent shelter for those that are homeless. It is about water for those that do not have safe drinking water. It is about health care. It is about the life of dignity. And when we see people continue to live in squalor, and when we see the economy remains in the hands of the poor, of the few, and yet the majority is landless and does not own the means of production, it clearly tells us that when we say the slogan, socialism is the future, build it now, we are far away from realizing that socialism. Yeah.
So we hear three veteran stalwarts, if you want, of the liberation movement: Ronnie Castro, Matthews Posa, and Trevor Manuel, all reflecting on this day, but all of them pointing to this question of truth and why up until this point we have not learned truth about the assassination of Chris Hani. Why, according to Cosatu, is truth still evading leaders of the mass democratic revolution? Is it because people who could be involved are still a part of that leadership?
Well, Thabo, it's a question that we also want to understand. It is a question that Dimpo was asking today. And I think where we are as a federation, we also want to know answers. Comrade Dimpo, Sis Dimpo took us through the things that some may not have understood or have had a knowledge of. The small evidence that was there, that was not considered. And when the Hani family and the SACP requested for the opening of the investigation, the answers that the family received leaves us to have more answers indeed. But we are also, as Cosatu, joining on the call for the opening of the investigation on this matter. And we think that we owe it to Comrade Chris, we owe it to his family, we owe it to the people of South Africa to really begin to do what is just in our country by really tackling criminal elements, as Dimpo was raising, not just about Comrade Chris, but about every family in South Africa that justice does not seem to favor them when they are victims, and yet justice seems to favor the perpetrators of violence in our country. So we are also calling for the opening of the investigation onto this matter so that the Hani family can be able to have the closure that they truly deserve.
Do you think the release of Janusz Walus dealt a blow on an already fragile tripartite alliance interaction?
It has indeed. It has indeed. You look, we were not shy in expressing our feelings and our views about the injustice when Janusz Walus was released. The fact that today we learned even more from Dimpo that she never even received the so-called letter that allegedly was written by Janusz Walus to the Hani family. Today, she is still looking for that correspondence that would have allowed him to then be able to get the parole that he received. And therefore, it leaves us to ask more questions, that when the blood of Comrade Chris spilled on that fateful day when President Nelson Mandela declared that in 1994 we shall then be able to cast our vote because Comrade Chris has died as a result of the injustice in our country. We are asking ourselves, shouldn't it be that the justice system that should be fair, particularly to the most vulnerable in our country that Comrade Chris died for, isn't it that the family of Comrade Chris deserves that justice? Is that justice given to them? And the answer is no. So, of course, you would have alliance component. You would have Cosatu, you would have the SACP, and you would have some comrades in the ANC raising their frustration about such a decision. It then begs the question whether the government of the African National Congress understand what is it that Comrade Chris died for? What is it that our former liberators died for? Is it the kind of freedom and justice that they liberated us for, that today their families are receiving the back of the hand of that justice system?
Talking of that justice system, the leader of the South African Communist Party is saying today that the liberation movement has become toothless, and part of the reason is because state power is being used as a blunt instrument, basically to silence the masses when they raise a particular concern, and pointing to the judiciary in particular. What's your reflection on that?
Look, we don't disagree with those sentiments. I think also Ausdimpo put it eloquently today when she also said that it has become normal in our country, internally in our own organization, but also in the country, South Africa, that when you speak against those that are in power, you are labeled. The justice system has a way of silencing you. And we have freedom of association. We have the rights that are enshrined in our own constitution, in the Bill of Rights. But it depends on who says what in our country. The voices of the poor in our country are becoming less. We don't hear those voices. It does not matter how people want to multiply their voices. Those that have money and those that are able to get the justice system, whether they are buying it or they have money to stage at the courts of this country, their voices are more powerful than the voices of those that do not have nothing in this country. So we do agree with such sentiments, and we think that, as we said, today was a day of reflection, but it must be a day of honest reflection that, as Ausdimpo said, that when we make the promises to our people, it must be the promises that we are able to keep. When we cite the Freedom Charter and the Bill of Rights, it must be because people, the ordinary South Africans, those that do not have money, those that are languishing in poverty, do not have to use money in order for their voices to be heard. It must be because it is built in the Constitution, it is built in the Bill of Rights, it is built in the justice system, that their voices, the justice system of this country, will amplify the voices of the poor, will amplify the voices of the most vulnerable in our country over those that have money to amplify their voices by using the justice system, because they can be able to take issues to the highest court of the land.
So, I mean, if we are to be honest, and every time either yourself or even the SACP are conducting interviews and you're complaining about the actions of government, the question that is always put to you is, why are you complaining about people who we are part of, right? You're part of the alliance. You have a platform to raise these issues. Today, Solima Paila saying, well, we want to now account for something that we agreed to. We can no longer be asked about policies that are in place that are no longer at the center of them, taking care of the livelihoods of the poor and the vulnerable in this society. Is Cosatu contemplating contesting political power?
Cosatu will never contest political power. We are a trade union organization. We are not a political party. We have said this many a times. We are a trade union federation. We understand our mandate. But Cosatu will never become a political party. We don't have any intentions of becoming a political party. So we will leave the ANC and the SACP on the contestation of power. But Cosatu remains a trade union federation. We represent our members who are coming from different political parties. We are dealing with issues of socio-political economy, and we will never become a political party. It has not worked, even for those that wanted to turn Cosatu into a political party. They failed, and we have no intentions of becoming one.
So when you hear a talk of let's build a new socialist movement, what are the elements of the socialist movement, and what do they look like, and how do they work in the context of yourselves being in an alliance with the ANC?
Cosatu is part of the alliance, and we have called for a reconfigured alliance where we are going to sit as an alliance and have the alliance as the center, where we discuss policy issues, but discuss policy issues at a level where the views of all tripartite alliance partners, when the decision is made, it becomes a decision that government must implement. Currently, as we stand, you have Cosatu that goes to its Congress and take resolutions, socio-economic resolutions that must influence the conference of the ANC. You have the party doing the same. Then you have the ANC, independent from the other alliance component itself, going to its national conference and taking the views of the alliance partners as we go, subject them to the Congress correctly so, and the outcomes may be what Cosatu wants to see, maybe what the SACP wants to see. It may not be to some extent. And the ANC then is bound by the conference decision that the ANC took. When we're talking about a reconfigured alliance, we're talking about an alliance that is co-governing, an alliance that would be able, when decisions are made at the alliance political center, at the alliance political council, those decisions, when they are made through broader consultations, when those decisions are taken, are decisions that will be implemented at the level of government. Not when we meet and we understand that we may not agree, and the ANC can still push forward on its views, even if those views may not necessarily reflect the views of the alliance. Yeah. So ours is about a reconfigured alliance. It is about a socialist pact. It is about an alliance that truly represents the views of the most vulnerable and marginalized in our country. So when we talk about a reconfigured alliance, this is what we mean. But we can also see that at times it gets to be misinterpreted by some in the ANC and also outside, to think that when we talk about a reconfigured alliance, it's because we want to exercise a power on who gets deployed into government. and who must be recalled, that is not a governing alliance.
Yeah.
It is not what we are interested in. Our interest is on policy. It is about the policies that we make and the policies that we implement that must change the lives of South Africans, the majority of the people of this country, particularly the black poor in this country. This is what the alliance must embody. This is what the alliance must seek to represent. It is not about who is governed, who is deployed in government or not.
Let's leave it there for tonight. I appreciate you. Thank you very much for coming on tonight. That's the president of Cosatu there.